Welcome to Lesson 7-7, Use Models to Add Mixed Numbers. Please write your lesson title at the top of your journal page. I can add mixed numbers using models. Please write your I can statement, and when you're ready to move on, we'll go ahead and move on to the rest of our video. You may pause if you need to at this time. Our solve and share problem for today states that Martina is baking bread. She mixes 1 3/4 cups of flour with other ingredients. Then she adds 4 1/2 cups of flour to the mixture. How many cups of flour does she need? Solve this problem any way that you choose. I'm going to write choose at the top so that I can remember my format for understanding word or novel problems. So I'm going to, first of all, circle the important numbers in this problem. I know that Martina is mixing 1 3/4 cups of flour with other ingredients, and she's also then going to add in 4 1/2 cups of flour to the mixture. I'm going to underline the question that I'm really trying to answer, which is how many cups of flour does she need? I'm going to box keywords. A keyword here is adds. I'm working with cups. And the fact that I can solve this problem any way that I choose is important. But the topic of our lesson is using models to add mixed numbers. So I'm going to draw some models whenever we go through it together, but I'm also going to show you kind of that standard algorithm way that we've learned for adding fractions with unlike denominators. The next step of cubes is that I need to visualize and evaluate what I'm really figuring out in this problem. So I think about it as if I was making bread. And I have 1 3/4 cups of flour, and then I'm going to add another 4 1/2 cups of flour to my bread mixture. So I know that I'm going to be adding fractions with unlike denominators, and they're also mixed numbers as well. So at this time, I want you to take a moment, pause the video, and I want you to work out this problem any way you choose. You may choose to draw out fractions like fraction strips, in addition to finding a common denominator so that we can work with these fractions. Go ahead and pause at this time, work out the problem, and press play when you're ready, and we'll go through it together. Okay, now that we're ready to look at our problem, I'm going to write out the problem we're looking at. So 1 3/4 cups of flour, and then I'm adding 4 1/2 cups of flour to that mixture. But I also want to represent this thinking about models as well. So I'm going to do that by writing out kind of what looks like some fraction strips. Try to make these as equal as I can. This is going to be 1 whole. So if I was thinking about a cup of flour, 1 whole cup of flour. I know that 1 whole is made up of 2 halves. So in this problem, 1/2 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of flour. And then I also know that 1 whole is made up into 4/4. Try to get those as close to the same as possible. This is just going to help me think about my problem a little bit as I'm working through it. Okay, so as I look at this, I notice right away that one of my fractions is in fourths and the other is in halves. So I'm going to want to get those both into fourths to be able to work this out. So I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to redraw that fraction bar. And I like to come down and think about least common multiple when I'm trying to find a common denominator for two unlike fractions. So I'm going to write 2 and 4. Multiples are the numbers that when I multiply a number times 2, such as 2 times 1, 2 times 2, 2 times 3, 2 times 4, those are going to give me multiples. And that's just what I'm going to do. It's kind of like skip counting or writing out our answers to our fact families. So I've written 4 multiples of 2. I'm going to write some multiples of 4, which is 4, 8, 12, and 16. And then I just want to find the one that's the smallest that they both have in common, which is 4. That's my least common multiple, and I know that would be the best denominator as I get these into equivalent fraction form so I can add them. Now, when I look at 1 and 3/4, 3/4 is already in 4, so I'm just going to keep that 3/4. That mixed number is staying exactly the same. When I look over here at my model that I drew out, I know that 1/2 is equivalent or equal to 2/4. I can also figure this out by figuring out what I need to multiply 2 by to make it into 4. And I know that's times 2. So anything I do to my denominator, I must also do to my numerator. And that's going to give me an equivalent fraction of 4 and 2/4. Okay? 4 and 2/4 means the same amount as 4.5. And now I'm ready to add. So I'm going to add my fractions together. The numerators I add, the numerator becomes 5. My denominator stays the same. And then I'm going to add my whole numbers. So I get an answer of 5 and 5/4. But you might notice that my numerator is larger than my denominator. So that means I do not have this fraction in its simplest form. So I'm always going to want to do that when I'm working with fractions. So I have another step to take before this is finished. I'm going to rewrite my answer down here, 5 and 5/4. Now, if I go back up to my model, I know that 4/4 is equivalent to 1/2. So if I look at 4/4 of the 5/4, I know that 4/4 is equal to 1. So if I take the 4/4 away from this 5/4, I'm going to get 1 as a whole number. So that means I can just add the 1 and the 5, which will give me 6, and then I'll have 1/4 left over. Now, because this is a story or novel or word problem, I need to label my answer. How many cups of flour will I need? And I'm going to need 6 1/4 cups of flour. Let's take a look at how some other people might have worked this. Here's an example of Grace's work. Grace did something similar. She drew out some fraction strips to kind of help support her as she worked through this. And she drew out a picture of fraction strips to show that 5/4 can be renamed as 1 1/4. We did that as well. Her work here matches very closely to the work that I did, and maybe the work that you did too. Gabrielle's work, she represented each fraction with strips. So right here, she has represented 1 3/4 by drawing fraction strips. And then she has represented 4 1/2. And if you add up the whole, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then she had another 3/4 here and another 4th here, that would be 6. And then she would have the 1/4, which gave her this answer as well. At this time, you need to write in the secret word for this lesson at the very top of your paper next to your lesson title and your name. And that secret word for the lesson is the word pioneer. So at this time, please write pioneer at the top of your paper. I also want you to go ahead in your journal and summarize your thinking. That means really describing how you worked this problem so someone else could read your description and understand how to work it themselves. You can talk about things such as finding least common multiple, or you can talk about how you drew out the fraction strips or how you did a combination of both. Make sure that this is a nice detailed paragraph because you will be sharing it with your partner in class tomorrow. Thanks.